primarily is the electrical activity in the brain, which those two things are highly correlated. So basically what happens is when we are exposed to different things in our environment, it will give our brain a response.
Okay, so hello everyone. Today we have a very special guest, as a mentor, as a teacher, and as a cognitive neuroscientist, as a certified sexual addiction recovery coach, Dr. Tarish Leigh Mam from the United States of America. And in this video, we are going to talk about the pornography, right? So before moving ahead, I would like to say that please check out the description, all the important links and the resources I have already given you in the description of this video. So now, first of all, ma'am, I would like to say very big thank you that you came here, and a lot of love and respect from the 1.3 billion people, because it is a very big opportunity for us that we can learn from your experience. Because if I talk about porn consumption, then India is the third largest country, right? And in worldwide, porn industry is a $97 billion industry, and in India we have the youth population is 29 million, right? So this is the whole scenario, okay? And India has reported 95% spike in traffic to adult side during the lockdown, and a lot of thing is happening inside India as well as. So first of all, ma'am, I would like to say very big thank you that you came here. And first of all, I want to ask one simple question, ma'am. What is the first thing that comes to in your mind when you listen the word India? First question.
That's an interesting question. I
Yeah.
don't know. I have a lot of friends from India,
Mm-hmm.
so um, it's probably the first word's probably not what you would expect, but I think of it as kind of discongruent, like that there's uh, a gap or divide between, some of the people. And I know that, my friends have been back there recently, actually. And, I know that that's their experience. I've never been there.
Okay.
But I have many friends that are from there, and I know they're concerned about their family members that are back there right now during um, COVID times, and that, some of them can't access especially COVID necessary resources, others can. So that's kind of what I mean by that. And I can expand upon that too, like in terms of pornography, like you've already said, is that, it's a country and a community that is really struggling right now. And the stress of this whole situation has ramped up use of pornography sites, and then the pornography sites have taken advantage of that by opening more access to
Yes.
India
Yes, ma'am.
specifically. So I really see it as like communities within that larger population that have some needs right now, and I'd love to be able to serve some of those needs.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. So, ma'am, my second question is, ma'am, tell me about your experience, education, and little bit about the pornography, how it's impacting our life.
Yeah, sure. So my journey in coming to help people with pornography consumption is an interesting one. And I'll give you the really short version, is that I started as a speech language pathologist, and I cared about communication, but I always focused on cognition, which is thinking. So that was many, many moons ago. And across my journey in terms of my education and experience, what kind of happened was I began to care more about people's thinking than communication. And then that led me, I have 2 PhD degrees. The first one is in communication disorders and sciences, but I focused on thinking, cognition, different theories and models of brain performance and how it falls out into, I call them the behaviors of the mind and body, basically our thinking and our actions.
Yeah.
And then I also earned a PhD in cognitive science, thinking about brain, how the brain functions and how that plays out. I actually have a lot of degrees, but those are the main ones that resonate. So then as I kept ongoing with my education, I became certified as a neurofeedback practitioner. So for the past 10 years, well, I'll back up for 1 second. I was a university professor
Okay.
for over 25 years. When
Wow.
I moved to where I live now, I became certified to offer a type of therapy that helps improve people's brain performance. That's called neurofeedback. So for 10 years, I've had a practice where people come in and I help them using neuroscience technology, which I had been studying for many years before that and using at the university. So through that journey, someone that I really cared about in the office was really suffering and struggling with anxiety, depression, really strange behaviors in terms of moodiness and anger. And I just could not figure this out. Finally, he told me that he has a problem with watching porn. And I didn't care about porn before that at all. And this was years ago. But then I cared about this person, so I needed to figure it out. And it was almost 4 years, actually, it was almost five, about 4.5 years that I studied porn consumption, compulsive hypersexuality. I became certified as a sex addiction recovery coach. I studied under and was mentored by some of the leading professionals in this area in the world. And I learned so much about this. But the whole time, my friend was struggling and up and down and, doing well, then doing poorly, went to all these other professionals and got terrible advice. Some of them enabled the porn consumption. Some of them didn't know how to deal with it. So long story short, once I figured it all out, I was able to help my friend within a couple months. And he's been completely porn free since then. And that was a few years ago that he was able to leave it behind and be free of it. And that's when I'm like, I made the first video on YouTube not thinking anybody would watch it. And now it's been seen by millions of people.
Yeah.
And the reception on that channel was so big that I'm like, I'm perfectly poised because I know all about the brain. I know all about cognitive science and how the brain falls out in behaviors. I now know how to back this thing out successfully. And I also know how to help people achieve long-term recovery because that can be really difficult when it comes to porn.
Okay. So, ma'am, so basically, I'm also interested in the brain and the neuroscience. So basically, I'm from the computer background, right? Computer science background.
Yeah.
So from that, I have learned so many things, and I have some sort of curious thing that I explore many, just like psychology, neuroscience, and all the other stuff, right? So, ma'am, the next question is, what really happened inside our brain when we watch porn?
Yeah. It is terrifying, actually. And I've made a few videos on my YouTube channel
Yeah,
explaining it,
yeah,
but I'll explain it here, hopefully quickly and fairly easily.
yeah.
And I always say that porn grabs people by the brain. People think it's other body parts, but honestly, what happens is usually young people find pornography on accident. So they're either shown it or they stumble upon it. Science shows that. And the younger the brain is, the more the dopamine release impacts the brain. That's proven by science.
Wow.
So when you find it at a young age, even if you don't like it, even if you don't know you like it, because your brain gets this hit of dopamine like it's never had before. And in one study, I've seen the number 20 milligrams as an example of a dopamine hit, but don't people get attached to that number. Don't get attached to the number because it's different for all people. But if you can picture it this way, that, doing your favorite activity in the world gives your brain 4 milligrams of dopamine. It makes your brain feel good, but it's also mixed with serotonin for happiness, norepinephrine, all these other neurochemicals all at the same time. So when you're doing your favorite activities, your brain's getting the perfect mix of good feeling neurochemicals. When you stumble upon porn, it gets this massive hit of dopamine, which brings you back. Dopamine is the pleasure seeking neurochemical. It makes you want to go back for more. So that's the first time you've seen it. The second time, what happens is, in the meantime, your brain's trying to figure out what to do with all this dopamine. So it regulates itself and habituates those levels. It like basically recalibrates itself to deal with the fact that it just got this big hit. So then the second time you see it, your brain now needs more than 20 milligrams to get the same feeling you got the first time. So and essentially it's like it doubles it. So now the second time your brain releases 40 milligrams, and you get the point, double a lot of dopamine. And that's what hooks your brain. So within two times that you've seen it, even if you don't like it, what you're seeing, your brain gets this big feeling of feeling good. And it also has an opioid pain reduction component to it. So it makes you feel good and it takes pain away too. And so after those first exposures, your brain's hooked on it. And so then what happens is young kids or adolescents want to go back for more because it feels good. And so now you throw in COVID-19 when people are extra stressed out and they're hanging out at home and they can't leave. It's the perfect solution. But basically, it becomes an internalized neurochemical addiction to the dopamine effect that your brain gets. And then over time, it's like if you think about alcohol misuse, most people understand how alcohol addiction works. First you have a beer or two, and then over time that doesn't do it for you anymore. So you need to have, whiskey, and over time you need even more. Pornography is the same way. And the way that it works is you need more frequency, you need longer exposure to it, you need more consistency, and you need more intensity. And then what happens is every time you ramp those things up, you're getting even more dopamine. And that's how people really get pulled into the screen and can't leave.
Wow, that's cool. Ma'am, I wanted to ask that how dopamine is made in our body and or in our brain. Have you any information about that? Right. Is
How is it?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So essentially, like the easiest way to think about it is that when our bodies are at homeostasis, it's called. So, like, we have an operating mode. And
Mm-hmm.
before we mess with our operating mode, it's at the optimal mode. And so, from a neuroscience perspective, what we're talking about are neurochemicals. What
Yeah,
I focus on in my work primarily is the electrical activity in the brain, which those two things are highly correlated. So basically, what happens is when we are exposed to different things in our environment, it will give our brain a response. And so that response will produce different electrical energy patterns. And I talk about them a lot in my YouTube videos.
yeah,
And those electrical energy patterns then will produce different neurochemicals and neurochemical cocktails or mixes. So, like, for example, if a tiger jumped out at you, your brain doesn't produce dopamine, it produces cortisol, the stress. It produces adrenaline so that your body goes into fight or flight mode and you haul out of there to protect yourself. Those are the neurochemicals that are associated with fighting or fleeing. The neurochemicals that are associated with arousal and pleasure, pain reduction, that's dopamine. Dopamine is when you see something and it spikes that component of pleasure seeking, that is a dopamine release that's associated with that environmental trigger. And so what we know about pornography is it's called a supernormal stimulus. And again, this has been shown by science that it produces in people when they are exposed to it, whether they like it or not, because of the sexual nature of it, first of all. And then in today's day and age, the shock and awe components to it, that what happens is it floods the system with dopamine. It's very high production. That's why they call it a supernormal stimulus. It produces more dopamine than can be produced by activities in the world. And they actually did a study, which they call the butterfly effect, that in butterflies, when they painted butterflies with artificial colors, those butterflies were more attracted to the artificial butterflies than they were to the real beautiful butterflies. And it's the same idea that it doesn't exist in nature. It's not real. And we can cross this bridge if we want to, that, the scenes in pornography are not what happens in healthy sexuality. It's unhealthy, addictive, hypersexual behavior. So it's not real. It is a big stimulus, and that's why it produces all that dopamine.
Yes, ma'am. And in your channel, uh, uh, you have, I think, 218 videos, and I have already watched all the videos within these
Great.
3 days, right? And actually, I'm using a Bluetooth speaker, and I'm right now working as an intern. So I'm doing my job, and as well as and continuously basis, I'm listening to your podcast and all the videos, right? So, ma'am,
Yeah, great. That's good.
yeah. So I want to one more question. I want to ask one question, that what is the, ma'am, gray matter of the brain? Okay, because in the book by Gary Wilson, so they discuss about the gray matter. So have you information about the what is the gray matter of the brain in the
Yeah,
context of the
so there's
pornography?
gray
Yeah.
matter and
Hmm.
white matter in
Yeah.
the brain.
Yeah.
And so basically, the different types of matter will conduct energy differently.
Mm-hmm.
And what has been shown is that when people consume pornography, that it changes the way that the brain uses electrical energy, which travels across the synapses between the cells. And so basically, either the cells have fat on them, which myelinates them and makes them so that they can transmit energy more easily versus not. And they're just two different types of cells in different areas in the
Mm-hmm.
brain. What's been shown is that the whole brain is impacted by pornography consumption. But the way that I think about it primarily is less like the types of cells and more about how energy is changed in the brain. Because going back to what I was talking about, and actually I didn't say it explicitly. To say it explicitly, what the science shows is that people are watching pornography as a mood regulation tool to change their mood. So the reason that people keep going back is they either feel stressed out or bored or overwhelmed or a combination of that. So those states come from different electrical energy patterns in the brain, which goes back to how fast the electrical energy is being transmitted across those brain cells. So basically, the faster the speed is being conducted, the more ramped up the brain is. So very fast energy in the cells we feel as stress and anxiety. Very slow energy across those cells transmission, we feel as boredom or burnout or overwhelm. So those cells have emotional correlates to them depending upon how electrical energy is being transmitted. That's what I think is the most important piece when it comes to pornography consumption, because the speed of electrical transmission then dictates the neurochemicals that are released, which then makes it so that a brain needs to go back to something to feel better, hence the mood regulation piece. So it's very involved, but I think most times people don't realize that the way cells are using energy in their brain, they can feel as a mood.
Yes, ma'am. Now my next question is that related to that, why we are not able to think or make decision while watching porn?
Why you're not able to what? I just didn't
Yeah.
hear you. Sorry.
Yeah. Why we are not able to think or make decision while
Oh yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. This
Yeah.
is a great question. So again, going back to electrical energy, but in a
Mm-hmm.
different way, what science shows is pornography consumption knocks out the frontal lobe. It's called hypofrontality. Hypo means slow or not enough.
Okay.
Hypo is the opposite of hyper. So hyper arousal is the state that most people are in. They're grinding, they're just exhausted, they're doing too much, or they're stressed out and they're ruminating and thinking. So what they crave from watching pornography is to knock out the frontal lobe so that for a few minutes or an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, whatever they're doing, they don't have to think. And so what happens is when you watch porn, it knocks the frontal lobe out. It creates hypofrontality. It deactivates the frontal lobe, which is the desired result in the short run. What people don't understand in the long run is they are literally deactivating their frontal lobes, and those frontal lobes are not coming back online if they have a consistent and frequent habit. And what the science shows is that the gray matter is being damaged. The cells in the brain are being damaged from the flood of dopamine because the brain is not supposed to have to deal with these frequent, massive dopamine floods. It's a super normal stimulus, too much, way more than normal being optimal. So what happens is then you can't make decisions for yourself in the moment. But what happens in the long run, and hopefully a lot of your listeners aren't there yet, is that in the long run, it can create memory problems, focus problems, brain fog. A lot of people I work with are at a point where they can't think anymore. People get fired because they can't continue to do their jobs. So many students out there. I think we're at a critical, as a college professor, we are at a critical point where young men are not getting into colleges and they're not able to make it through because of their pornography habits. And they don't associate the two. Pretty soon it's going to be women who are in the same place because yes, women, I'm sure you probably want to talk about this at some point. Yes, women watch pornography, but right now it's much less than men, but it's growing. So I think that, from what we're seeing, this is it's knocking out people's frontal lobes and it's making it so that they can't think, and then it's not coming back online.
Uh, yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I have noted down some while you are talking. I have noted down some points in which you have talked about the depression, right? So, is there any connection between the depression and the porn and or the mood?
Yeah, absolutely. So what
Yeah.
the science shows is that people's moods are bringing them to porn in the first place, but then by watching porn, and I can go back to that in a second, when they watch porn, it creates or makes worse anxiety, depression, moodiness, which is different than those two things, irritability, anger. And most people don't realize that in pornography consumption, there's a cycle for people who it becomes a compulsive habit. And for most people, it becomes a compulsive habit because of what I just explained to you about the supernormal stimulus. So what happens is there's a cycle that happens where people are triggered by an environmental, something happens. They feel stressed out or bored. We'll just say those for sake of ease. The minute they think they're going to watch porn, there's a drip of dopamine. Dopamine starts dripping. The flood doesn't happen, but the minute you have the idea, maybe I'll watch some porn, you get a little dopamine hit, and that dopamine hit is pulling you in. So then you feel stressed out. That's mood number one. Then you go into watching pornography. You feel so much better because you get this dopamine. That's the A effect, is what we call it. That's the first effect. Your brain gets numbed out, it gets some pleasure, and it gets pain reduction. Now, after you act out and watch pornography, in this cycle, the B effect is dopamine levels go lower because they're trying to recalibrate. Cortisol levels go higher because they're trying to account for all the dopamine that was there. So then on the back end or the bottom end of the cycle, what happens is you feel worse. You feel even more stressed out and lower than you did, which leads you right back into the cycle. So that becomes depression, anxiety when you're not consuming pornography. And an easy way to think about it is what happens is there becomes not enough dopamine in your life anymore. Remember going back to that 4 milligrams. 4 milligrams doesn't cut it because right now you've got your brain at 60 milligrams. The 60 milligrams is trashing your brain, but that's what you want, and you can't get it from the world anymore. So when you go to your brother's birthday party, there's not 60 milligrams of dopamine there. Now you're depressed because you're not getting it in your life. And that happens to people. That's why they have to go back and get a hit to be able to get through work. And then they have to be able to go back and get a hit to get through their weekend. And it's really creating a lot of problems for people. And if I could just comment on one more thing that I haven't really shared outright, is that not only is it knocking out the frontal lobe in terms of decision making and deactivating the frontal lobe, what the science shows is that the reward centers in the midbrain are being fried out. There's D2, they're called D2 dopamine receptors in the midbrain, in the reward center. By flooding those receptors with dopamine all the time, they can't sense the dopamine anymore. So these large amounts of dopamine aren't creating the pleasure like they used to because the receptors are fried out. So that creates long-term problems for people in that they will have to watch hours and hours of porn to be able to have the same pleasure that they did at the beginning in 5 minutes because those receptors aren't working. Then we know from the science too that breakup rates and divorce rates are 2 times higher because of porn, because people are no longer interested in being with partners. Human beings don't do it anymore because it's like the butterflies. Those human beings don't have all the colors like the fake butterflies do. Real human beings don't do what is happening in pornography because it's not healthy sexuality. So it's really, a problem.
Uh, yeah, yes, ma'am. I'm totally agree with that, right? So some of them I have personal experience too, right? So, ma'am, uh, you have discussed about the D2 receptor, right? So basically, how many does it take to recover the D2 receptor of the dopamine?
It's different for all people, and that's why
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to say anything, because when it comes to numbers, and I know people are frustrated when, if I make a video and people ask, I'm like, this answer's loaded, and then people will
Yeah.
joke like, another loaded answer, because there is no answer. There's within normal limits, bands. But I think a better way to think about it is, and I know this helps people that I work with, is if you find you need to watch more pornography, or you're watching it for longer than you used to, if you have to go back more often, and definitely if you are ramping up the intensity of genres and things that you are watching. I work with a lot of people who are disgusted by what they watch, but they can't stop watching it. And we can talk about that later again too if you want to, but those are some of the markers that I would look for instead of worrying
Mm-hmm.
about, like, what levels did the D2 receptors, because that doesn't mean anything for an
Yeah.
individual.
Yeah.
What means more to a person is, like, if you have to watch it and you don't want to, especially, something's happening with your reward center in your brain. If you're at work and you might get fired, but you can't not, that's because your receptors aren't working and you need to get a hit. It's, if you think of it like a drug addiction, where if you can't get through a day or 2 days or 5 days, like, there's something going on in there, and your brain has created, it's in the literature, it's considered a diseased mechanism in the brain. The way that the brain is functioning is not at ease. It's diseased. Diseased means less than optimal, not working with ease. So if you have these experiences in your life, your brain's using a diseased neural mechanisms. And that's, I think, more a better way for people to be able to think about it.
Okay, ma'am. So, ma'am, you have talked about the memory, and also I have noted on the behavior, right? So how
Mhm.
does porn impact the memory power and behavior? Have you any information about that? Memory power,
Yeah, and I made one
focus
video
span.
on
Yeah.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, I made one video, and actually that video has a lot of science behind it.
Yeah.
And I've looked up a lot more science, but
Mm-hmm.
that video in particular has a lot of science. And we know from science that, and I know unfortunately from working with a lot of people who experience this very thing, is that it can really make it difficult to remember important aspects of if, especially if you're studying. I think the easiest way is for students, and that's why I have such concern about that,
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
because
Agree.
yes, and I
Yeah,
don't know if you, hopefully you don't have any personal experience with that part, but if you look on my channel, so many people write in the comments that I'm trying to study and I can't. And then all they can think about is porn. But really, it's their brain going, I need a hit of dopamine to get through this studying. Studying's hard for the brain. So, long story short, when it comes to memory and behaviors like that, it's called executive function. Executive function comes from the frontal lobe. Executive function is being able to have a bigger project and you can chunk it down into smaller steps. And then you're able to take the action steps that lead you towards completion of the bigger project. So if you just think about a class at the university, that's the easiest way to think about it. Like, if you're going to be able to complete a class that's a semester long, that you have to take 5 tests and do 3 papers and read entire, you know, chapters of books, those are many small parts that lead you towards the bigger goal. But that's the case in many people's work too. So people have work projects that they can't, like one person I'm thinking of who's on the brink of being fired made vital mistakes in numbers in their job. And because they couldn't remember, and they checked it multiple times, but their ability to focus and to use executive function is so skewed because those areas of the brain are not firing on all cylinders, basically. But what I can tell you, and especially for your listeners, I like listeners to have a takeaway. Like, you can learn all this stuff, but what does it mean for your life? What it means for their life is, if you consume pornography and you find that you're having difficulty thinking in any particular way, and if that's new for you, it's likely caused by pornography consumption. And I just made a video that's coming out on Monday about porn
yeah,
induced ADHD.
yes, ma'am.
And I'm coining that term to a certain extent, but really what it is a low power brain deactivated that's also running too slow, which is also anxious. That's the complete opposite of how to remember things well, how to be able to behave well in the present. You need to be able to focus in the present, not be low and slow. And so, memory can really be impacted.
Uh, yes, ma'am. Such kind of things also happened to me, right? So I was also addicted in 2019, right? So I was totally sucked up that time, right? So basically, I figured out a lot of things that what should I do. Then I started, and I somewhere found that how I will control such kind of stuff, and this happening in our my life, right? So then I study about a quotation of the Bhagavad Gita, right? Uh, Krishna said that the mind is indeed very difficult to restrain, but by practice and the detachment, it can be controlled. So I pick up the only two word that is called practice and detachment. So at that time, I was almost consuming approximately 1 to 2 hours on every basis. Then at that time, I figure out that whatever you will consume, that will become the part of your life, right? And whatever you will consume and whatever you are consuming, that is also becoming the part of your memory, and that memory is also responsible for your action, and that action is also responsible for your thought process memory, and the same cycle is going again and again, and you will never come up with this such kind of a step, right? So I have remembered that I have choose this practice and the detachment means I have all deleted all the history and all the steps, right? And after that I realized that this is the thing that we need to care about that, right? So ma'am, that was my experience, right? So ma'am, I want to ask about so ma'am, you have talked about the compulsive masturbation, okay? And so ma'am, please tell me about about it. What is the drawback of compulsive masturbation, and how it is dangerous for us.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And by the way, I love what you just said. It's really beautiful, and
yeah,
it's completely in line with the way that I think
yeah,
that if you, what the behaviors that if you need a behavior, and this will lead into our discussion on compulsive masturbation, but
yeah.
if you need a behavior, that behavior is becoming master to your mind,
Yes,
basically. And
ma'am. We
that's why
agree.
I
Totally
always
agree.
use the outro of control your brain,
Yeah,
or it will
or it will
control
control you.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when your brain's using a diseased mechanism, it begins
Yeah,
to control you. You're no
yeah.
longer
Yes,
in
ma'am. I
charge
agree.
of it.
Totally
It's
agree. Yeah,
driving your behaviors
yeah,
because of the needs that it has. And so, especially if you feel yourself at that point with a compulsion, I don't want anybody in the whole world, I don't want anybody to be driven by a compulsion, a need to do something to feel okay in the world. That's what it is. It's like, I need this to get through my life. But that is survival mode. And I believe that people should be in thrive mode. And when you're in thrive mode, your brain's using the optimal pattern so that you are in control of your existence. And then I always talk about it, very similarly to what you read by Krishna, that
yeah,
when you're on purpose in the present, you can stay detached from outcomes
yeah,
and detached from any perceived needs. Because if you're on purpose, you don't have any needs.
yeah,
You're in flow state, which is a
yeah,
brain mechanism that's better than optimal. So when you're serving humanity or your community, you're in that mode. When you're with your family and your people and you're relaxed with them, you're in that mode. When you're doing your hobbies and the things that were put in your heart, you're in
yeah,
that mode. So now let's move on to compulsive masturbation, which
yeah,
is the complete opposite of that mode.
yeah.
And so what happens is it is another manifestation of compulsive hypersexual behavior disorder, which has been considered a disorder in the International Classification of Diseases, the 11th edition, which is
Mm-hmm.
just a few years old. So the number one way that that manifests is in pornography consumption. But people don't just watch porn, they watch porn and masturbate. So that gives them the double whammy of a dopamine release. And so I absolutely have to make sure that I'm really clear on this, because I do, haters are going to hate. You're going to get haters anytime you say something that everybody's doing and nobody wants to stop. You're going to get haters. But it's not the same as if you have a healthy sexual relationship with a partner in the world, because in that case, your brain's getting the perfect neurochemical cocktail all mixed into one. You're bonding yourself to your partner. You're getting pleasure. You're getting happiness. You're getting connection. That's when you're with a partner, healthy sexuality. But if you continually need to go back to a compulsive masturbation habit, you are isolated.
Ma'am, let's go through the last questions, right? So, ma'am, you have a lot of experience, okay? And in this podcast and in this Q&A, I have learned many things from you, right? So basically, I am from India, right? And in India, where I'm living here is very difficult to survive right now, right? Lot of COVID symptoms is going happen, right? So, ma'am, the another question is that I wanted to ask, ma'am, in your full life of span or your whatever you have accomplished till now, okay, what is the most amazing things for you in the as a porn recovery coach?
Mhm.
Mhm,
So the I actually, someone told me this today, which is
mhm,
exactly what the most amazing things that I am trying to do. And then when people tell it back to me that I've helped them do these things that I'm about to tell you, it's the
mhm,
most amazing thing. And what people will tell me all the time is that I have inspired them and empowered them to be able to make the changes in their life that they want to. But more importantly than that is to be able to stay in peace through the challenging parts of life. And so this person I was talking to earlier has a lot of really difficult things happening. And this goes back to what you just said, is
Yeah.
that, it's one thing to have goals and to achieve your goals and all of that. And, that's been important to me across my life. But what's more important now is that to take the opportunities that come to me to be able to continue to heal myself. I think of it as healing, to
Yeah.
heal myself through my own challenges, to keep my brain in that optimal mode, to be able to stay in peace. And then to help other people to be able to do that and not need to run to something to regulate their brains to make them feel okay. And it's really difficult for us as humans to just, and I know that the range of the human experience is a big one, but all the masters, if including Krishna, have been
Yeah.
able to stay present, stay in peace, and stay on purpose regardless of what's happening to them in their physical human environment. And I think that's the most amazing thing, that being able to get to a place where I basically can do that most of the time, and that I can help people to be able to accomplish that themselves is really powerful.
Uh, yeah, yes, ma'am. So basically, when you say the Krishna word, so I have something striking in my mind, right? So that was, I'm a very curious person, right? So I have completed the Bhagavad Gita, Bible,
Mm-hmm,
Quran,
mm-hmm,
and a lot of Indian religious book, right? So so let let me show you one more thing. So right now I'm reading this, right?
yeah, that's that's amazing. That's
Yeah, yeah. So basically this is in English, right? And
uh-huh,
I have another one that is in Hindi, right? So yeah.
uh-huh. That's great. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm the
So
same. It's so funny because
yeah,
I could show you the same thing. You
yeah,
and
yeah,
I
yeah,
are kindred
yeah,
spirits.
yeah. And apart from that, when I say, ma'am, all the things, right? So I have noticed, it's my personal experience, right? At that time,
Mhm,
whenever you will do such kind of stuff related to masturbation and pornography, actually your
mhm,
mind give the some statement that little bit, little bit,
mhm,
little bit,
mhm,
right? After that, things will be worse, right? And then you realize that, oh my god, you have wasted your 2 to 3 hours,
mhm,
and again same the cycles, you are going and going, and your life sucked, right? So
mhm.
ma'am, this is all about, I think we have completed our 40-minute session, right? So
Yeah,
now the best part of this podcast is that what I learned from this podcast from your point of view, and while talking in this 40 minutes period, right? Peace, right? Live in
mhm,
present in moment. Okay, try
mhm.
to live present in moment. So whatever you have discussed in your video, that try to focus on the breathing. Okay, and so for that I am using a clock, right? So whenever I was feeling that i'm I'm going to be worse, right? And I'm getting very worse, I'm feeling very anxiety, then I sit, stop, close your eyes, and try to focus on your breath, and feel the tick tick sound of clock, right?
Yeah,
So
it's great.
yeah, and such kind of things give me the insight that no, it gives the lot of insight that yes, what you have to do in your life. Okay, what is the purpose of your life, right? So such kind of things that I am uh, exploring right now, right? So ma'am, I have learned from you the peace, try to live in present, and the work you are doing, it's a very amazing thing, because we are not admitting that this is such kind of things that impacting the whole country, right?
Yeah,
And yeah,
absolutely.
yes, and we need to understand it, and if we are
Mhm.
not able to understand, then it's going to be worse. We have to
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I
Hmm.
obviously a really important thing for me for you to have a takeaway and other people is that
Mm-hmm.
this is impacting your brain
Yeah,
performance. It's
exactly,
damaging your
exactly.
brain.
Yes, ma'am.
And one more cool takeaway on what you were talking about on focusing your breathing is that meditation sciences, which we don't have to use the word meditation, but
Okay.
when you quiet your mind and you focus on the clock, if you do that for 3 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
this is the science part, it
Mm-hmm.
creates a brain reset. You will
Wow.
reset the mode that your brain
Wow.
is in. So when you do that, if you can do it for 3 minutes, you're going to change your brain performance pattern for the better.
Yeah.
And that is a beautiful strategy to get you out of where you were and
Mm-hmm.
where you want to go. So that's great.
Yeah. So, ma'am, whatever I have learned, I have discussed. What kind of things you have learned from my side? Uh,
Yeah, so
yeah.
I have really enjoyed my time with you. I really
Yeah.
liked talking with you.
Yeah.
What I think the biggest thing is that this really is a global problem. And for me, when people write to me, thank you for doing this, you're really
Yeah. Yeah.
helping me.
Yeah.
Being able to talk with you, and then you having a podcast where you share this with all the people that
Yeah.
follow you,
Yeah.
that one voice can really, like me having the courage to put those videos out, because it takes courage for me to put them out,
Yeah.
just so you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Me having the courage to put them out and have you see it and it resonate with you and you share it with others and it resonates with somebody else, that one person can really have a massive global impact. Like,
Wow.
think of that. We're on the
Wow.
opposite side of the world right
Yeah.
now. And we are now attached through our, kindred spirit energy. And
Yeah.
we're on the same path. And somebody else is going to hear it and join us. And we can, one voice, my one little voice who cares about this, can make a big change. And so can yours. And so can the next person's. And it really can become big, and it feels small when we do it.
Uh, oh, okay, ma'am. So, last thing is that, ma'am, you have a program, Pod Brain Reboot. Ma'am, uh, please explain about it.
Sure. So
Yeah.
I am in the midst of creating a nonprofit organization
Mm-hmm.
because my goal is to teach people how to overcome pornography
Mm-hmm.
consumption and not have to pay for it
Yeah.
and not have to sign up for it. They can just get it and get themselves out of this situation. But of course, I live in the world where I need finances and I need
Yeah.
my time to be
Yeah.
able to be dedicated to it. So I've created 3 programs at different price points, which will, as soon as my nonprofit paperwork is through, it's considered a donation. So for people who care about writing it off on their taxes, they can. But what I want people to know is, if you purchase one of those programs, all the money goes back into the cause. This isn't me trying
Yeah.
to make money. I want the world to know that I am going to create as much content as possible to help people. And so right now there's a small, a medium, and a large program. And really, people can join it depending upon the resources that they want to put into this, and it's time, money, and energy. But some people, have money, but don't have the time. The big program's an 8 hour and 11-minute program, and it teaches you everything you need to know.
Wow.
But you have to commit to that, And so I have a lot of people in that program. That includes a group with me. So we get on Zoom. I'm working with people all across the world. And so I have people in all the programs, and they're really enjoying it and being able to engage in the material so that they evolve. And that's what this journey is about: learning about the damages, learning about the strategies to start implementing to overcome the feelings that you're talking about, and to be able to move them from where they are to where they want to be. And people have different needs in that journey. So trying to serve them at different levels. And then, of course, my ultimate goal is to be able to get as much content into the world so people understand the damages, the dangers, and then know what to do about it.
Now, I think we have already crossed our 40 minutes, right? So, ma'am, I'm going to stop this meeting. Okay. Please give me
Yeah,
2 minutes more. I have something special for you, and I have invested
sure.
5 hours on that, right?
Yeah, sure. No
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah. Right. So, I'm going to speak in Hindi little bit, right? Yeah.
Yep.
आज के इस पॉडकास्ट में हम लोगों ने टैरिश मैम के साथ में जो भी हमने पॉडकास्ट स्टार्ट करा, इसमें आपको पता चल गया होगा कि किस तरीके से पोर्न आपके दिमाग को इम्पैक्ट कर रहा है। तो आगे भी जो अगर वीडियोस आएंगे, मैं भी सोच रहा हूँ कि इसे हम लोग टॉपिक पे कंटिन्यू करेंगे, बिकॉज इट्स अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक गाइस. सो वट एवर यू हैव क्वेश्चन, ओके, आप लोग कमेंट करिए, और कमेंट करके और जितने भी डिस्क्रिप्शन में लिंक है आप उससे एक बार चेक कर लीजिएगा, राइट. सो राइट नाउ इन इंग्लिश इज दैट, if you have any question related to this podcast, you can comment in the channel description or in the channel, right. And please go and check out all the description I have already given in the chat box, right. And the most important thing is that try to check and try to visit the Tarish Leigh Mam channel, right. You will get a lot of interesting videos, right guys, right. Yeah. Now, ma'am, I'm going to stop this meeting. 1, 2, 3.